I have been with many dying people, and it is often beautiful. I'm sure many of you have sat beside a bedside of a loved one as they passed, perhaps even had the good fortune to sing to them or hold their hand, surrounding them with a circle of love made up of family members and friends. Sadly, we know that is not always the case. Death can also be tragic, unexpected, and painful. An amazingly sad number of people die alone. Poignantly true during this COVID-19 pandemic. We also live in a country where death has, by and large, been made into a medical experience, something to be avoided rather than a natural course of events. Yet we know that death is not the final word, regardless of the circumstances. People and animals that we love live on in our minds, our hearts, and our lives long after they die. People's lives and their deaths leave their imprint on us, often in surprising ways. I remember the grief and the shock of the parents whose 21-year-old son died from an overdose, having become addicted to opioids after an injury in high school sports. Their love and grief humbled me and all who grieved with them, and I carry them every day. My husband's life was permanently changed after he witnessed a car accident many years ago, driving home from work one afternoon. He was driving through a suburban neighborhood. A man was walking across the street when he was struck by a car. Bart pulled to the side of the road, knelt down with the man, and held his hand as he was dying. He just wanted to know he wasn't alone, Bart said. I witnessed a softening that happened with my husband that day, and it has never left. So too, I've been shocked by the surprises that can accompany death. How my own mother's skin became translucent as she sat in her living room, surrounded by golden light, even as her body was racked with pain from a lifetime of mistreatment and poor health care. Or, in the hospital, the woman who came back to life after being pronounced dead by the nurse, as her family and I surrounded the bed holding hands and prayed the Lord's Prayer, and she sat up, causing her grown daughters to believe in miracles. I've seen the struggles that death can bring. The old man frustrated because he was so ready to die, and his body would not let go. The young woman frozen in grief over her stillborn child. So too have I been with those left behind after their loved one's death, as they made room for their layered and complicated feelings: shock, despondency, regret, remorse, gratitude, and even relief. All of these are normal. There's no right way to die or to deal with the death of someone we love. There is only our way. If anything unifies us as people, it is death. We will all die. We will all lose people we love. We can be assured of these things. Death is a great equalizer, even in its varieties of circumstances. Perhaps the question then is not how to stop from dying, but rather how to live our lives and the numbered days we have remaining. Having conversations about death and how we live before we die can be transformative and helpful for everyone involved. Doing so can allow us to share our fears, our hopes, and our wishes for our death and our lives. Atul Gawande, author of Being Mortal, writes, "If end-of-life discussions were an experimental drug, the FDA would approve it." Now, these are not always easy conversations to have. People fear that they're depressing, or they think they're not necessary. When I ask parishioners if they've talked with their loved ones about their wishes for their memorial services, funerals, they will more often than not respond, "Oh, they know what I want," referring to their family. This is not necessarily true. People don't always know what we want, even if we think they do. I've supported many families as they struggle to plan funerals, to envision meaningful memorial services, and to discuss the distribution of belongings. You may think you've had these conversations, however, they're good to have on a regular basis. Because remember, my friends, those who you are discussing with these things often don't want to remember, and we need to remind them. When we have them, it allows us to talk about what happens after our death, but also what matters while we're alive, how we want to die, and what quality of life means to us, because that is different for every person. In his book, The 5 Invitations, Frank Kostensky writes this. He says, "We will never know who we are and why we are here if we do not ask these uncomfortable questions. We learn about ourselves as we prepare for and have these conversations, in addition to helping our loved ones. Becoming intimate with and able to talk about these things makes our present days all the more beautiful. We remind ourselves what matters." Ostesky asks, could we turn toward death like a master teacher and ask it, "How then shall I live?" The question of death and what it has to teach us is at the core of the work of social science, medicine, and many theologies, notably Buddhism. And in his decades of work as a chaplain at the Zen Buddhist Hospice Center in San Francisco, Frank Ostesky identifies 5 things the dying can teach us. He calls these the 5 invitations. And they include, number 1, don't wait. 2, welcome everything. Push away nothing. 3, bring your whole self to the experience. 4, cultivate don't know mind. And 5, find a place of rest in the middle of things. I invite you to consider each of these invitations for a moment, and maybe even choose one that you're inspired to focus on over some period of time to come. And I'll run through each of them briefly again. The first invitation that the dying teach us is don't wait. You've heard this question. What would you do if you knew today was your last day? So what are you waiting for? What are you waiting to do, to say, to offer? Don't wait. The next invitation is welcome everything, push away nothing. Shonda Rhimes, creator of Grey's Anatomy, spent a year saying yes to everything she was invited to do. I recently spent a week doing one thing every day that scared me. Welcoming everything is radical. It doesn't mean we accept everything. It does mean that we can be open to it. We can ask what it has to teach us and how we might be changed by it. Welcome everything. Push away nothing. However, to do this, one must bring your whole self to the experience, which is the third invitation. It means we bring our heart and our curiosity as well as our head and what we think we already know to every experience. The fourth invitation is cultivate don't know mind. It happens when we approach life with an openness, allowing it to teach us, being open to being changed. And finally, the dying teach us about the necessity of finding a place of rest in the middle of things. Nature is a great teacher of this truth. Author and anthropologist Angelise Aryan writes this. She says, nature's rhythm is medium to slow. Many of us live in the fast lane, out of nature's rhythm. There are two things we can never do in the fast lane. We can neither deepen our experience nor integrate it. We can choose to slow down, or as many of us know, sometimes life does it for us. 7 years ago, I had a very serious accident which landed me in the emergency room. And as I lay there immobilized, I didn't know how things were going to turn out, or if I would survive. Surprisingly to me, the one thing I did know, and this surprised me, I knew it would be fine if I died. I knew it to the marrow of my bones. I had absolutely no fear. None. And I also knew that moment that if I did live, I would share that knowing that death is not scary at appropriate times, such as I am right now and have done many times, holding people's hands. Japanese monks have a tradition of writing short poems before their death, which I might encourage all of us to do, even now. Astesky practiced this with his hospice patients, and I have one I want to share with you as I close this reflection. It is entitled Sono's Death Poem. And this is what she wrote, Sono's death poem. Don't just stand there with your hair turning gray. Soon enough, the seas will sink your little island. So while there is still the illusion of time, set out for another shore. No sense packing a bag. You won't be able to lift it into your boat. Give away all your collections. Take only new seeds and an old stick. Send out some prayers on the wind before you sail. Don't be afraid. Someone knows you're coming. An extra fish has been salted. The process of death really can teach us what matters. which for many of us is far less than we might think. Focus on those things that matter, my friends, and allow them to fill your days. Amen, and blessed be.